So, if I were to start with the political stuff for today, a while ago, in fact, this was my first video segment from a live stream that I did. In fact, it was a Pokemon stream. I was playing a ROM hack called Pokemon Sun Sky, which I do intend to return to at some point in the future, because that game is cool. And also very weird. Regardless, I was talking about an impending strike of United States rail workers, because in the United States there was a whole debacle. In fact, it's ongoing, as I'm about to describe here, where rail workers in America were not entitled to any sick leave or time off. And they had to work longer than 8-hour workdays. I think it was something like 12 or 14 hours. And their employers were basically using every bit of leverage possible to ensure that the workers didn't get a fair contract, so that they would be like dissuaded from striking. Basically, if there's tiers of working conditions, and the bottom tier is slavery, this would be about a tier above that. Like the next level up from that would be, well, actually no, it would be like 1.5 layers. There we go. It would be like 1.5 layers above literal slavery, because at the very least these guys were members of a union, and the union has been, to their massive credit, advocating for these guys. If I can find an article here. Oh, shut the fuck up, CNN. U.S. freight rail strike could cost the U.S. economy $1 billion in the first week. Now, granted, that is true. That's the truth, because if rail workers strike, the entire economy freezes. But they understand that the framing there is that, oh, obviously it's the rail workers at fault here. They're framing it as it being incumbent on the rail workers to go back to work and keep our economy churning or whatever. Whereas in reality, it is incumbent on the rail companies to give them some fucking time off. Jesus Christ! Like I remember one of the guys from this rail company actually did an interview with Fox News, a right-wing media outlet, and of course, the even though they are very pro big business and like anti-worker in their policy prescriptions, like when they have a white collar worker, like they still claim to advocate for these people, so they had to kind of shut up and listen. And one of the things that he said in the like working conditions, describing the working conditions, was, I want to go home and see my family again. Literally, like he was being held hostage at his place of work. And then a little while ago there was a tentative deal, like an early sort of shaping up rail deal, where the guys would have gotten a pay rise, a pretty substantial pay rise, which is good, but they would not have gotten any time off, or any paid leave, any sick leave, or any of that, which is horrible. Or granted, they got like 1 day, like, oh great, 1 day of sick leave. So most of the rail workers, I think, have voted down that version of the contract, and have elected to go on strike anyway, which I think is the correct decision. And again, I'm gonna see if I can't find a good news article covering the issue. What the fuck is this? I need to find something with decent framing. Ironically, Axios seems like it's going to be the most fair news outlet here to the rail workers, which is strange because Axios is like a center-right news outlet. Railroad workers are fed up, but hoping to avoid a strike. I think that's a decently accurate description of the scenario here. Why vote yes on something I'm unhappy with? We've taken enough concessions. Matthew Weaver, a member of BMWE, one of the railroad unions who voted down the Biden-brokered labor agreement, told Axios on Tuesday. Yeah, so Joe Biden, the president of the United States, had a hand in creating this tentative union deal with the rail companies, which was wholly inadequate and really did not give the rail workers much in the way of concessions outside of the pay raise. Which most of that pay raise was just to keep up with inflation. It wasn't an especially huge pay raise. Like 14% is substantial, but it's not the biggest thing. Either way, the big picture, negotiations between the railroad unions and their employers are edging towards a cliff. Now that 4 of 12 unions, making up a majority of the workers, have rejected this deal. Between the lines, workers say they're fed up, especially after working through the pandemic when they were deemed essential. They want paid sick leave and the ability to take some time off between often long and grueling shifts. By the way, when I say they're like on their work hours are like 10 to 12 hours per day, that's not like the official thing. That's not really the 100% the way it works. Basically, since these guys are rail workers, they have to be like on call, quote unquote, to do their job. There's like a range of time where you could be on call, where you could be called into work. And these guys were on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every week of the year. So they did not have any time where they were allowed to have free time. All of their time belonged to their employer. Pretty fucked up if you ask me. The other side. The carriers say workers had their chance to negotiate, but that time has passed. They want them to accept the deal reached in September. Yeah, fuck off. That is my counteroffer. What to watch? The new deadline is December 9th. If these guys can't work it out, you might see a strike. Or more likely, Congress will intervene. This is, in my opinion, even more dangerous. If a strike occurs, if a railroad worker strike occurs after December 9th, which is, the deadline for the new contract, then Congress has the authority to forbid them from striking. In U.S. law is very anti-worker. Congress can just step in and say, no, we're making it illegal for you to go on strike. We're making it illegal to protest your working conditions, so that, technically you can have a union and all that, but you have no leverage, no negotiating power in the negotiations. Because otherwise, we will send in the police to keep you in line and force you back into your work. Basically, kind of like the stuff that you would see in the Gilded Age with like the what is it, the Pinkertons? My remembering that right? So this is a difficult situation, right? Because if on the one hand, if they don't go on strike, then the cause of workers' rights has been pretty severely damaged. Like, these guys need their time off, otherwise they're gonna work themselves to death on the rail yard and whatever. The consequences of not striking are pretty dire for the workers. But at the same time, if they go on strike, they risk the cops being called to use state violence against them. And that could also be a massive blow to the struggle for workers' rights in this country, because it would mean that Congress will have fewer and fewer and fewer reservations in the future about just using the cops to tell us, get back to work. Well, I say us, but like working people. It's pretty bad. As for what I want to see happen, right? I'm hoping that the workers here go on strike. I'm hoping that the strike happens. Honest to God. Even though that would, technically mean that there could be some disastrous consequences for the United States economy, I think it is worth it in the long run, because it forces the hand of the United States government, since these are, national rail workers. It forces the hand of the United States government to choose whether it wants to be an occupying force or like a mediating force, if that makes sense. If the government decides to crack down on these striking workers, then basically in the workplace we are now dealing with both a corporate world and a set of state institutions that are hostile. But the other choice is for the government to act as a mediator that actually brokers a decent enough contract. Even at, like, starting from almost zero, there's not a whole lot, I don't think, that you could really do, realistically speaking, to ensure that working conditions don't fucking suck. But, at least giving them some concession on every front that they're asking for, I think would be much preferred. Shocking given that I'm a socialist, that I would prefer that the workers go on strike and get their pay raise and their time off. I know, who could have seen this coming? And because no segment would be complete on my stream without me finding a way to rail against mainstream news outlets, every single news outlet except for fucking, like, Al Jazeera and Axios, which is very weird. You know what? No, I understand why now, because those are the only two international news outlets that I'm seeing here. Every news outlet except for those two are framing it against the worker. And I'll show you that once I learn this here move. I think I'm going to forget. Focus energy? Yeah. Let's take a look at just some of the headlines here. CNN, I've read this one earlier. U.S. freight rail strike could cost the United States economy $1 billion in the first week. NPR, National Public Radio. Possibility of a nationwide rail strike looms as another union rejects deal. Notice how they're putting the onus on the unions. They're making it seem like it's the union's fault for rejecting the deal and not the corporation's fault for offering one of the shittiest deals I've ever seen. USA Today. Major rail union rejects deal brokered by Biden, threatening a strike. Again, I'll just run through them and then we'll come back. West Virginia Metro News. I've not heard of this one before, but I guess that's a thing that exists. Coal Association leader says rail strike could devastate industry. CNBC. Union Pacific CEO called to hearing in Washington as risk of rail strike rises. Associated Press, AP News. A rail strike looms and impact on U.S. economy could be broad. This one's a little bit more neutral, but notice that the implication here is still that, like, the people going on strike are kind of at fault for this. Another one from CNBC. Union Pacific CEO called to DC. This is the headline from earlier. Hearing on disturbing use of... Hold on, let me see what this is. Disturbing use of, what is it, embargoes? Something like that. Then, let's go to... The Guardian. This is a, I think The Guardian is British, a British news outlet. I could be wrong about that, but, Britain not exactly the most pro-strike, pro-union country either. Even though they have more unions, and I think more union support than we do. How a potential U.S. rail strike could affect the economy. CBS News. What a looming rail strike could mean for the American economy. All of these are hyper-fixating on the strike, which is, in the most literal sense, reactionary. They're not, they're taking it immediately and at face value from their corporate daddies. Notice how they keep referring to CEOs and a coal association leader and, like, the people who care about the economy, in air quotes, which are, the executives. Al Jazeera, here, let me actually explain a little bit better why this framing is bad with some comparatively neutral framing. See here, Al Jazeera says, U.S. railroad workers vote down proposed contract. Now, even though that, it assigns the potential blame, it assigns some potential for blame to the railroad workers. Notice that there's a separate like acting force in the headline, the proposed contract. Here you have the union workers, the railroad workers, who do not like this other thing, the proposed contract. So they're actually saying, even though I disagree sort of with the neutrality, journalistic outlets do their thing, they're giving you the two options. One of these two things could be at fault, and it's not necessarily one or the other. Now, I'm sure if you were to read the contents of this article, you would find that it is actually the contract that is at fault and not the workers. Yeah, the ball is now in the railroad's court. It's up to the railroad companies to meet the unions. So, the content of this article is good, but notice that they give you two things. Whereas the other headlines are all, like, only pointing the finger at the act of striking. Back to the CNN headline, U.S. freight rail strike could cost the U.S. economy $1 billion in the first week. Notice you have the only actor in this scenario is the strike workers. And then you have this other thing, the victim, the implied victim of that action, which is the U.S. economy. Fuck the mainstream press. That's a little bit of a news analysis for you. Good evening. I'm Dan Rather with news, analysis, and commentary. And a lot of these are the news outlets. These are the news outlets that the right wing would cry about and call the liberal media, the left-wing media. Whereas the right-wing media doesn't come up at all. All of the like news outlets there were centrist or like kind of what are viewed as left-leaning media outlets. They give that kind of coverage, and then the right-wing media just doesn't talk about it at all.